the fresh breeze, and the hills so close you can touch them. During this first talk, for the people who are here for the first time, as well as for all of us who have been to so many or a few retreats, let us start out by talking about listening. Listening to a talk like this, and listening to the breeze stirring in the trees. And we will also talk about authority, the making of authority, the becoming authority. We'll look into it together. Maybe as it happens, as it unfolds, or before it unfolds. And then maybe we can also look at what is our relationship with each other. Right now, during a retreat. And maybe when we leave here, what is our relationship to each other? What is it based on? All of us, since we were very small, having had to go to school, and before that, living in a family, we were told and asked to listen to what was being said. And when we were asked to listen, there was always a ring of threat in it, or demand. You better listen or else. You better remember what I say. This was implied in the request for listening, to remember what was being said, to incorporate it, as it were, into our body of knowledge, of learning, of education. In school, our memory of what was said was tested. We were tested whether we had really listened. Listening in that case meaning remembering and the ability to repeat from memory what was heard or read before. Very rarely, if ever, were we invited to listen together. To listen together at this moment to the sound of wind, to the breathing that happens in every one of the 42 or 41 people sitting here. Breathing happens and listening happens. The wind is heard by all of us, isn't it? And if not heard acoustically, some of us may have difficulty or inability to hear acoustically. There can still be in touchness with what is happening within and around us. In a new way. the new way meaning not to hear it, to feel it, to see it, in order to remember it, to do something with it, to become more knowledgeable, more experienced. But just to be in touch, in listening, looking, sensing, touch with what is there, this moment of listening. Not for the sake of something else, of becoming more informed. For the sake of being here with what's there without division. Immediately. The sound of the wind, has one ever heard it before? So immediately. Is it immediate now? Or is there already a flow of words? The description, the wind, the visualization of trees moving. Ideas, I like it or I don't like it. Remembrances associated. When the wind blew so hard last time that some of the trees fell over, and then fear or apprehension elicited by that association. This is how this human mind works, operates through association of what is remembered with the impression now, which is named, labeled, described, interpreted very often, most of the time judged as good or bad. There's no one there doing it. It happens on its own because the brain is so constituted that it remembers and associates not just words with each other and meanings and interpretations with the words, but feelings and emotions that were once elicited by similar words and associations, or that are elicited now and can be felt, sensed throughout the organism now. So in describing, interpreting, judging, associating with the past experiences and the emotions that go with all of that, is there still the wind in the trees now? The calling of a bird? Or has something happened almost instantaneously to an instant of pure perception? The immediate taking over by the brain functions and the becoming involved in that process of thinking, remembering, fearing, associating emotions, becoming so involved and encapsulated in that process that the mind is shut off from perceiving more wind gently blowing and leaves rustling now. Coming to the talk itself, because this is what we call that is going on right now, we call it a talk. I don't feel, this is parenthetically, I don't feel I'm talking to you. To describe it more accurately, it is a quiet, open listening to what is going on here in this mind, which is representative of mind, human minds. A listening and looking and putting into words for all of us to listen to look together or alone. Not necessarily to remember what is being said. It may be remembered, it may be not remembered. But to look, as it were, into the mind, to let it become transparent in its constant functioning. To have insight into that. Because as we just said a moment ago, normally without that insight, without the listening and looking inwardly to what is actually happening in this mind, we get so involved, or there is such getting involvedness with the content of the description of the wind, we use that as an example, the interpretation, the judgment, I like it, I don't like it, the reminders of a storm, the fear associated with it. There's such an engagement with that the process itself as it is happening is not seen into. It ticks away unheard, unknown, unperceived, and yet has such tremendously powerful influence upon how we react to a situation and to each other, based on word, image, idea, judgment, associated ideas from the past, fears and so forth, desires. So is it possible, right now, this morning, to listen to a talk in a fresh way? Being aware what is happening and has been happening in the mind. Maybe an expectation of what the talk would be about, wanting to hear certain things that fit one's needs, maybe wanting to hear about a meditation practice, something one could learn, something one could practice and repeat and remember. Is there such expectation in the mind of what this thought, what this talk could do for one? Is there? Can one sort of question quietly, not forcefully? When the question is open and quiet, is there expectation in the mind? Something may bubble up, reveal itself. Yes, I am expecting. I'm expecting you to say this and not to say that. And can one look further with expectation of hearing something does there go the actual or potential disappointment if it is not what one has expected? Something different is said than what one wants to hear. This is how we do get disappointed, isn't it? And frustrated or angry. We want something very badly, which means the mind, the thoughts are about what one is expecting, what one wants. There's image and idea of that. And not just image and idea of what one wants, but the whole body responding organismically to that expected want, desire. Sort of moving, as it were, toward something that is palpably noticeable in the body. When one thinks of something one wants so badly, we can play with this at times. Imagine something that you really want very badly and notice the body orchestrating that idea, that image, that wanting. The thinking about it, the imaging it, and the body, all systems go to get it. And if it cannot be gotten, if something gets in the way, things turn out differently, this body on the go feels frustrated, and so does thought. Putting into sentences or words, I didn't get it, why do I never get it, why does somebody else get it? Why me? I'm just sort of improvising examples. The examples are in our life experience, for each one of us. All that needs to happen is some listening to it. Either it can be evoked, something that has been so passionately wanted and one didn't get it and all that went with it, to watch it, not the content of the ideas and what one wants, but the process, the very functioning in wanting and fearing not to get, and frustration and anger when we don't get it. That there is some insight into it, some direct seeing, not just caught up in the words and imagery and emotions, but in the fact that it is happening and how it is happening as we go. And we don't have to look it up in any book and remember it and then sort of have it in the head. It's all there in our moment-to-moment responding and reacting. We are an open book. When the mind shifts from sheer entanglement in the chapters and the pictures to wondering what's happening and listening momentarily to expectation and disappointment as thought and physical intertwined processes that are not separate from the wind in the trees. Or are they? Someone says they're not, but if the experience is, this is separate, and then I don't hear the wind, and if I listen to the wind, I can't pay attention to anything else, then a question is asked, what is this separation? Because something imposes separation on what is not divided. The physical, mental processes of a human being are not divided from winding and treeing and stars at night, sun in the morning, cool air, wet grass. What divides it all up? This can be one of our questions if it's interesting to us. The very fact that there is thinking and labeling and judging and reacting and knowing and associating and concentrating, meaning shutting out what else is going on this moment. Can we find out for ourselves in listening for moments at a time to a talk and the wind in the trees as well as breathing, permeating this body? In what has been said so far, listening together, looking together, and the words pointing to all of that, to the listening, to the trees, to the mental processes and the physical accompaniment, talking about that and inviting, looking together, listening together. Is there authority in any of this? Is there? Is the one who is speaking about all of this, inviting listening, pointing things out that are happening in this mind as well as in any other mind? Is there authority in this person? Authority meaning feeling urged or pressured or driven or inclined to take what is being said as the truth without examining it, attributing to the one who is speaking here something, authority, knowledge of the truth. Whatever one is attributing, one can look. Is there anything attributed here? To look at, to bear it, expose it, so it can be seen, and not operate in a hidden way. Because talking is not taking place here in order to establish authority, to pronounce anything dogmatic, doctrinal. But to simply and hopefully as simple as possible put into words what may in fact be going on in oneself. Open for inspection. Open for discovery by each one of us as the talk proceeds. Is this what one expected from the talk, from the one who is talking? Opening up in oneself for inspection, for discovery, what is actually happening, by listening together and looking together carefully. Maybe it is not what one is expected, but that's what is happening here in the morning, during talk time. Not a teaching being presented, to be accepted, incorporated, remembered, known, repeated to others. That's not what these talks are about. They are really a group meeting, if you will, with at this moment just one person talking, and yet feeling in the closest of touch with each other. Because our minds are not separate from each other, and our bodies are so similar, albeit no two alike. But so similar in its functioning, which we just pointed out this morning. Of needing to label, needing to judge, needing to know, and then becoming ensconced in that, separate with our personal experiences, what we think are personal experiences and knowledge, and not open to keeping looking, keeping touching, keeping listening to what's actually happening. And not only that, but imposing now the knowledge we have gained, the imagery we have acquired, image of someone else, image of myself, and keeping that going and imposing it on future encounters. I know what you are, I remember you. I may not even remember you, but I remember someone who looks like you. And therefore I know you too. This is not all voiced that logically in the mind, but it happens instantaneously, reflexively. Knowing and reacting from knowledge and image at the expense of being here and examining freshly, as for the first time, even though knowledge and image arises, one can see it arising. Remembered image, prejudice, it arises, it's so deeply ingrained, but it need not be acted on, it need not be condemned or judged, but seen for what it does. It prevents looking and meeting together now. It does, doesn't it? Can one find out for oneself? And find out that the moment we judge and condemn or accept, say this is our human nature, then we don't see anymore. We don't look, we don't examine. we stick with another idea. I'm not authoritarian about this. It's all open to questioning. And we do have meetings, group meetings and individual meetings, to come together after talk, noon, night, morning, to discuss, to question, maybe to challenge what has been said. I'm not infallible. I may not have seen something, not seen it clearly, overlooked something else. So this is a mutual process of finding out and learning together. So if anything is not clear during a talk, or one feels it is not so, I see it differently, or one doesn't understand it at all and wants to go over it, that's what meetings are for. At least let's put it this way, this is how they can be used. I will never tire of going over something, or rather, I won't remember what I said verbatim. The situation is new, but we can start freshly to look at prejudice or associated memories, judgment, whatever has come up in the talk or outside of talk. What was meant to be pointed out is there is no authority in this, no absoluteness. It's all open to looking and questioning by oneself. And not to project authority on another human being, or ignore its growing in oneself. Because there's always pleasure in becoming someone else's authority, the pleasure of power, of being somebody, underneath of which is the ache and pain of being nobody important. And therefore seeking importance by becoming others' authority and basking in that attribution, in that kind of relationship. It's always a very temporary basking. It doesn't hold. It needs to be constantly renewed and refreshed and maintained and repaired. So can one open up one's desire to be authority to others, or to make others into authority for oneself? To feel secure. I feel secure if I know I have an authority that I can relate to. Someone who knows what's best for me, who knows the truth. These thoughts, which are thoughts, do we see that? That these are all thoughts. She knows the truth, he is an authority, he's my teacher, she's my guide. These are thoughts, aren't they? Right now, we're thinking about it. It's thinking. And from that thinking comes a feeling, or may come a feeling, that we call security, which is sort of the calming down of insecurity, which is a restlessness in the body, which we call anxiety or insecurity. See, all of these words really describe actual states which we usually never bother to touch because we think we know because we've labeled it. But all we know is words. What do the words refer to? This is what we're also exploring here. Our desire for authority, our desire to be an authority. What is it? Why? In listening to the wind shifting and shaking the branches and leaves, where is their authority? It's just happening, isn't it? Because thought can invent authority. God is blowing the wind, or the wind god is, or goddess. But that's thought. You could say, how do you know? I can see it. Right now, that thought came up. What makes the wind blow, I don't know. And it's not necessary to know because it's there right now in its fullness. In its fullness, amidst an empty listening. So where are we after this talk this morning? What is our relationship with each other? Because that's what we were going to ask and look into. How are we relating to each other? On what basis? Someone said this morning in a meeting, we are always, at all times, all of us, performing roles, and many during the course of a day. And these roles are in accordance with the images we have of ourselves, of how people see us, or how we think we see us, how we want people to see us, what we want to be, what we don't want to be, what we are afraid of being seen, and so we may hide some of that. But always, or are we? I wouldn't put it so definitely, so inevitable. But let's examine it, draw attention to it. Are we usually performing roles, one or another? If it's not this one, it's another one. According to images. Coming here, certainly coming here for the first time, there must be a feeling, the mind in uncertainty in trying to establish what role is expected of me to play here. Particularly having heard all kinds of things in an opening orientation session of being quiet. What is my role here? Sometimes people come into the meeting room and say, what is the etiquette here for meeting with you? In other words, what role should I perform? Can these roles that are being played, the playing of it, the imagery that is involved, that shapes the roles. Can that come into awareness, maybe for glimpses at a time? Not condemn it, not judge it, not the other idea, I should be without roles here. It's not, a retreat like this is not for enforcing or establishing new shoulds and trying to condemn old shoulds. It's to reveal them, throw light on it. That this is what just happened. I should act this way. I shouldn't have acted that way. Just to hear one say that to oneself and the physical feelings that go with it. To be open to it and interested. Maybe some humor about it. Incidentally, there's no etiquette in coming into that room there. There's 2 double doors and they may evoke all kinds of ideas. But it's just to keep it a little private, keep the noise down for the others. How are you? Hello, a hug or a handshake, or if one is shy, whatever. Doesn't matter. Can we meet each other as we are? Oh, first we have to see all the roles, right? They're there, are they? One person said, I never am who I am, but I don't know what I are, what I am. That doesn't mean one is paralyzed with not knowing who I am. That just means I don't know which role is my role. There's wind in the trees and sunlight pouring through the windows. And someone enters the room and someone is already sitting there. Hi, how are you? And maybe noticing the shyness due to an idea of how I should be or what she thinks I should say, but she may not think at all. Just be there and listen together, look together, enter into a question together, or just sit quietly without fulfilling or performing a role. Even though the roles want to take over, one can see it, feel it, hear it. That's mechanical, that happens. But it doesn't have to be overpowering. So what is our relationship with each other? This morning, during a talk, during this retreat, what's one's relationship with oneself, as we put it? There's a very complicated way of putting something that's very simple. There's not somebody and somebody to relate to. But we put it that way, so let's ask, what is our relationship with oneself and each other? Leave it as a question and watch in the light and sound of the question and the airplane. We will end here for today.